All right. Well, good morning, everybody. It is April 5th, Tuesday, 2022. I believe it's right around 8 o'clock in the morning. It's been a couple of weeks off. I hope you all have enjoyed them. I do wonder if anyone was able to help out ASEP with their home energy surveys, but I'll be circling around with them to find out. I think we did. I did send a few bodies their way. But for today, we have a mining discussion, a mining industry overview and update with our friends. So we have Miss Matthias as well as Miss Skibinski, and I'll be handing it over to them. So without further ado, well, I guess one further ado, just as a reminder to everybody, again, we're a little less formal here than say a chamber committee. So it really is just the mining show. You may post any questions or comments you have in the chat box. I will be monitoring. Otherwise, you can, as ever, just go ahead and take yourself off mute and fire away, or raise your hand and you'll be acknowledged. So, all right, without further ado, we'll go ahead and get this show on the road.
Well, thank you very much for inviting us. It's a pleasure to be here. I am going to introduce myself while screening and hope that works well. I'm Karen Matthias. I'm the Executive Director of the Council of Alaska Producers, which is the statewide association for the large metal mines producing in Alaska, as well as some of the advanced projects.
And I am equally pleased to be here. Thank you all. My name is Deantha Skibinski. I am the Executive Director of the Alaska Miners Association. I feel a little silly introducing the Miners Association to a group that is so familiar, but as a reminder, our organization does, we work very closely with Karen. All of Karen's members of CAP are members of AMA, and AMA's additional membership is our placer mining industry, our state's one coal mine, rock and gravel and sand mining, and then the vendors and contracting business that supports our industry. So Karen and I really enjoy delivering these presentations together across the state. And I do want to say that today we built upon a presentation that we gave to the legislature. I know that there are a lot of things in here that you probably already know, but we wanted to share with you what we do share with the general public to give you, a little more information as you have your conversations with your colleagues, and, talk with you about what we talk to lawmakers about. So forgive us if it's stuff you already know, but we always feel like sharing information is a good thing. So with that, let me talk about what we're going to talk to you about today, and that is the global factors of mining. So the existing significant demand and the predicted significant increase of the demand for minerals worldwide. We'll discuss our reliance on foreign sources of minerals and the policies that we need to produce more here at home, both in the United States and truly here at home in Alaska. We're going to talk about why we believe Alaska is the place that we should focus on to increase domestic production. And then we'll end by spotlighting all of the benefits for Alaska and Alaskans from mining in our state. So Karen, you're reading my mind. Thank you. Karen is forwarding the slides for us both. So you've likely heard one of us say before that minerals underpin everything that we do, from the airbags in our cars to medical devices, to the fact that all of us are able to tune in to this via Zoom today. Our way of life is absolutely impossible without minerals. Whether you like mining or not, it's impossible to live your life without mine products. Our dependency requires the steady production of them, and right now the production of them is happening worldwide. But in terms of getting the minerals we need, we have only just begun. In terms of how we live our lives today and the pursuit of renewable technologies and the pursuit of energy storage, it's sent the demand skyrocketing, really. The production of the minerals has not had a subsequent demand or surge of production, and it's something that we really need to focus on. There are world entities like the World Bank, the International Energy Agency, and other entities that have studied the global energy goals, and they're projecting a massive increase in mineral needs moving forward. So to give you an example of that, the IEA found that the typical electric car requires 6 times the mineral inputs of a conventional car. And an onshore wind plant requires 9 times more mineral resources than a similarly sized gas-fired power plant. Overall, the energy sector's overall needs for critical minerals could increase by as much as 6 times just by 2040. So this is not a long-term problem. This is coming at us very quickly problem. And just a quick note, even though more minerals are required to pursue these new technologies, these entities like the World Bank have shown that the overall carbon footprint from the actual mineral extraction to its end use is still far less than current technologies. So there is an honorable and good thing that we are pursuing here with new technologies that can still be done by mining. Next slide.
Sorry, Deantha, it does not seem to want to advance. Just go ahead with the recycling and I will try to make this work.
Okay. Oh, there you go. We're good. Thank you. So when we look at the growing demand for minerals, I think there's no question about that. We've got to think about where we're going to get them. And we do need to first address recycling. It is something that we should continue to pursue, and we should invest in technology to improve the efficacy of recycling. It is part of the mineral strategy, but it's still not going to be enough for our needs. Another projection from the World Bank is that even if we double the recycling rates for base metals like copper and aluminum, it won't get us there. The IEA report that I mentioned earlier identified 6 pillars that would be part of a broad approach to actually achieving mineral security, and recycling was just one. Instead, they prioritize and emphasize that ensuring adequate investment in diversified sources of new supply. And they suggest, and this is a quote, strong signals from policymakers to create conditions conducive to diversified investment in the mineral supply chain, such as reinforcing national geological surveys, streamlining permitting procedures to shorten lead times, providing financing support to de-risk projects, and raising public awareness of the contribution that such projects play to the transformation of the energy sector. So as you can see, these are a lot of issues that we talk about, but there is a worldwide look at. These are all equally important. This all of the above approach is really the only way to get us to meet our mineral needs. And we haven't really achieved a strategy on how to get there. We've had world entities say this is what we need, but certainly in the United States and even on a worldwide scale, the IEA's executive director says today, the data shows a looming mismatch between the world's strengthened climate ambitions and the availability of critical minerals that are essential to realizing those ambitions. The challenges are not insurmountable, but governments must give clear signals about how they plan to turn their climate pledges into action. By acting now and acting together, they can significantly reduce the risks of price volatility and supply disruptions. So there's a lot of technical global information here, but we can reflect that Alaska meets all of these pillars for an approach to mineral security, and in particularly the first and the last points. This really is Alaska. We are a new source of minerals that is needed for diversity. And we are a place that does it right here at home. So we have shown the world already that this is where we shine. And we are really, a shining student of how this can be grown into a worldwide strategy. So knowing that we have to increase mining altogether, I would like you to just think to yourself, where do we want to mine and where do you want mining to occur? And certainly over the last month, we have watched the world, we've certainly watched political instability unfold in areas of our world. And the increasing global insecurity and the disruptions of our supply chain has been a major talking point, no matter where you are, no matter what you do for a living. And we've seen, how weak the global supply chain really is. And it gives us pause that domestically sourcing what we need not only makes us stronger, but it helps us as a country help those that are more vulnerable. We talked about this a little bit offline at the beginning, and I won't specifically call anyone out, but I think some of us are starting to give pause that it takes some really unfortunate and tragic world events to make the general population think, we should probably strengthen how we get our minerals and our sources, the things that we need domestically in secure jurisdictions. Still, unfortunately, the minerals that we need are being mined in unfriendly countries that, at best, they have the ability to hold our economy hostage. We are importing 90% of our rare earth needs from China, and we're getting the majority of the world's cobalt from the Congo with operations that, they employ young children in poor conditions. So you have to ask yourself, where do we want to mine? Do you want to mine in the Congo, or do you want to mine in a country that has strong safety and environmental laws?
Well, and I heard that Russia was a very major supplier of nickel, which I didn't know until recently. Certainly regarding the supply chain, even before this unpleasantness in Ukraine, COVID really showed us the tenuousness of our supply chains
That's
and the
absolutely
risk of reliance.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I hate using metaphors like a perfect storm, but I think in the past 2 years, with COVID, with worker shortages, with transportation issues, with the situation in Ukraine, we have had a real escalated look at how vulnerable we all are in terms of getting what we need. Here's a really impactful, relevant, and timely quote from Senator Murkowski, and we think she really said it best when she talked about our reliance on foreign adversaries for critical mineral needs. We are vulnerable, and I feel like I've said that 5 times in this presentation already, but we are because of our dependence, and we are at a disadvantage. And if we want to change that, we have to improve our federal permitting system. Our nation's laws in place are among the strongest and the most stringent in the world when it comes to development of industrial projects like a mine. But recent changes in their implementation by our current federal government has resulted in a negative impact on investment and the kind of investment we need to grow mining with no added benefit to the environment or to our safety standards. And the bullets on this slide summarize the fundamental policies that are needed to grow mining in the United States. They're the building blocks of what it takes to bring mineral investment to our country and to our state. And it's unfortunate that we have to realize that we've taken major steps backwards in the last year or so. So while our current federal administration has, discussed its desire to achieve its climate goals and has acknowledged that more mining has to be done to do so, and they've gone as far to say is we should do this domestically, it really hasn't acted accordingly. And just quickly to go over these bullets, we've got to have access to our mineral deposits, and particularly in Alaska, our known mineral potential is in most cases remote. You in Interior have the very unique situation where there is road access to your mines. That is not the case for most of the rest of the state. And it is, due to the remoteness and sort of the patchwork of land ownership, there is a lot of federal regulations that have to be navigated to explore a mineral deposit on federal lands, or even if they're on state or privately owned Alaska Native Corporation lands. There is still a lot of federal interaction when you're looking at pursuing these deposits and eventually bringing them to an operating mine. And instead of the multiple use management and the insurance of access to a lot of these mineral deposits that our nation's laws were really built upon, our current administration has instigated significant changes that disrupt access and make it more difficult to access the mineral deposits in our state. We've seen major steps backwards in our National Environmental Policy Act process. This is the nation's permitting process. It was created alongside our nation's environmental laws. And in time, since they were created, the process has really swelled to take several years. The documents are thousands of pages. They have limitless topic areas, and they've become really difficult even for agencies and those of us that do this for a living to understand. So you can imagine how much difficult it's made the general public to engage in. There were attempts under the previous administration to make this process as thorough, but to have it be more efficiently managed, and those have been rolled back by this administration. And not only has the ability to engage in the process suffered, but the coordination between regulatory agencies has suffered as well. So if we want to take a look at these kinds of things and see how mining in America can be improved, I'd ask you to just kind of take a look at the announcements that have come out of Washington, D.C. in the past month to 6 weeks. There have been a lot of things on critical minerals. In late February, the White House came out with an order and a strategy titled Securing a Made in America Supply Chain for Critical Minerals. And it emphasized the importance of critical minerals being produced domestically, but buried in that announcement was a lot of directives to federal agencies, and mostly the Department of Interior, to engage in looking at how hard rock mining is done across America and reform it in a way that insinuates that it's not being done responsibly, and to make changes that will frankly continue to erode investment. And I know an issue you are all familiar with is that same day, the Department of Interior also announced that it had asked a federal court to send the final permit for the Ambler Road back for an additional analysis and for more consultation. This discussion alleged deficiencies in the process, and that it wasn't a strong enough process. And quite frankly, the process for the Ambler Road went through 3 federal administrations. The initial permitting started under the Obama administration and concluded under the Biden administration. It had dozens of public meetings throughout Alaska, and particularly along the road corridor, and multiple opportunities for public comment. So obviously this is a decision we're very disappointed in, and goes right back to my very first point about access to lands. These are the kinds of things that are detrimental to investing in getting more mines in Alaska and in the United States. And since that time, frankly, we've seen more announcements come out of the Biden administration. As recently as last week, we had a presidential determination to use the Defense Production Act to get more domestic minerals. This is a huge step. This is wonderful. However, in the announcement, there was a narrow list of minerals only related to battery storage, instead of saying we have got to figure out all the minerals that our country needs and concentrate on how we can develop them here. So there are, I think, honorable intentions. I'm an optimist. I like to find the best in people. But unfortunately, all of these overarching announcements from the Biden administration are not coming with policies that get permits and get miners to work. This is obviously something we keep working on over and over. And I saw Greg Bringhurst dial in, and I want to thank him. Our congressional delegation has been amazing on this. They have held a number of hearings and called out the irony and the hypocrisy when the time was needed. And I think with their attention and close eye on these issues, we will see more improvements at the federal level. So this is where I turn it over to Karen, and you'll hear from me more in a bit.
Okay. Actually, since we're having a handover, I would open it up for questions or comments.
I should have said that, Jomo. Thank you.
No, it's fine. Anybody? Okay, well, just be reminded, you may ask questions or post them in the chat box. Certainly mixed messaging from the administration. I think that's a nice diplomatic way of putting it. All right, well, please carry on.
Thank you. So my screen has frozen a couple of times already while Deantha was speaking. If you can't hear me, Deantha will text me and I will turn my video off and see what I can do. So Deantha covered the soaring demand for minerals to build the technologies for a low carbon future. We know that increasing domestic production is good for our nation's economy and security. So let's make sure that Alaska gets its fair share of that investment. We want to be part of the national solution and at the same time help grow Alaska's economy. It's good for the economy, it's good for security. What are Alaska's advantages? Well, I'm going to start and cover mineral production or mineral potential, cover the strict environmental regulations, and then I just want to point out that in terms of our excellent track record, every single day, our producing mines are showing that they can operate to the highest environmental and safety standards. So when it comes to potential, the Fraser Institute has an annual global survey of mining companies, and they consistently rank Alaska in the top 5 jurisdictions for pure mineral potential. Usually when we give these presentations, we have a map of where we're mining in Alaska, but we wanted to take a step back with the legislature and talk a little bit about what resources we have in terms of our potential. We asked DGGS if they could come up, if they could provide us with a map showing the resources. And it turns out that's actually quite difficult. There's so much in Alaska that it's hard to get it all on one map. What they gave us is this one, or of the ones they gave us, we selected this one, which covers most of the minerals we're particularly interested in. But as you can see, it's a very busy map, which is a good thing if we're talking about mineral potential. And it would be even busier if we showed occurrences, but this actually starts with the circles, which are the prospects. And prospects are places where a geologist has found an occurrence, and the company is willing to put some money into doing some soil sampling, some mapping, maybe some remote sensing, in the hopes of finding a discovery. And discoveries lead to drilling to determine what kind of potential you're really looking at. The diamonds on the map are those places where there's exploration, drilling going on. There's 44 projects right now, at least in Alaska, that are active in terms of anything from early stage exploration all the way to advanced development. And then there's the operating mines, and there's 6 stars on the map, and they represent the large producing mines. They're pretty hard to see given how busy this map is, but I've got another one in a minute that will provide a better look at that. Oops, sorry. So,
Matthias, while we're on
yes.
this map, just kind of yes, just out of curiosity, how much of a jump start on this process of rare earth minerals, and critical minerals, how big of a jump start could we get if we were simply doing that separating of things we're already mining, i.e. gold or coal?
My screen froze and I got some of that, not all of it. So I want to give Deantha the option of responding to that.
Yeah, so Jomo, I think your question was, how further ahead would we be if we had earlier on pursued some of the classified critical minerals and rare earth elements as the same way that we did coal and gold?
Not exactly. Again, we have operating mines. They're bringing up a lot of soil, which a lot of material. Of course, we're processing for certain things, i.e. right now, it's mostly the highest value item, which is gold. Mm-hmm. But of course, there's other stuff coming up with it. So I guess really my question was how big of a head start do we have, a little jump start if we could simply start processing out these critical and rare earth minerals from the value stream we already have?
Not necessarily. And I'll tell you right now, I know just enough about this to be dangerous, but the processing of gold versus a rare earth element is entirely different. The hard rock mining process for gold, it's called hard rock because the gold is suspended in rocks like granite, et cetera. And rare earth elements is just a different tangibility kind of thing. The technology for processing those, quite frankly, is still in studying research phase. So it's not something that could have or could currently, could have been done in the past and could currently be done right now. It is something that is, I'm sure you have noticed there is a priority and a lot of global interest in investing in that research, but it is certainly not something that we could be doing alongside a gold mine right now.
Got it. Okay.
And
thank you.
If I could add, technologies have continuously improved over the decades. And so we're able to capture, economically capture minerals now that we wouldn't have been able to decades ago. And so there is talk about, what's in old tailings, and, can they be reworked in order to capture more of the original ore that was, sought, or other metals as well. I love the comment in the chat about it being like bycatch for minerals.
That's you.
And so there is a lot of research going on right now about how the technology and mechanics can improve to actually get a higher capture of the minerals that are already there. So yeah, there is talk also about going through old tailings and being able to do that. It all comes down to economic feasibility, and whether you can make money doing it, and sometimes that's a question of whether there's going to be technological improvements to make it more economic.
Well, it's all come down to economic feasibility here in the Western world. The reason that our adversaries are so far ahead is simply because they work under command economies where they could, someone directed them to make large capital investments, so they could get ahead on an industry. Mr. Burgraff, it looked like you had a question.
Yeah, I don't know whether this is a subject to bring up now, But one of the big problems, we have some huge deposits of nickel, copper, lead, and they're basically locked up now. The Pebble project could have provided a lot of rare earth minerals along with copper. As a youngster, I worked in Southeast Alaska with the Fish and Wildlife Service at Glacier Bay. There's a huge nickel deposit there, which is off limits. And unfortunately, these areas are off limits. And, I don't know whether it's something that we need to look at as far as trying to be allowed to develop those areas in an environmentally sound manner, which I feel can be done, especially with the Pebble project.
Thanks, Roger. It is really frustrating when we know that there is potential to face some of the access and regulatory issues that Deantha mentioned in her presentation. So I sympathize there. Going back, you look at this map and you think, well, look at all this potential. Why don't we have more mines? And Deantha covered some of the challenges in terms of our lack of infrastructure, our high cost of energy, and the fact that, like every other industry in Alaska and elsewhere, we're dealing with labor shortages and supply chain challenges. It certainly all is a tough force for us to reckon with. And the reality is, if I can get my slides to advance, they're being very slow there. Even in the best of circumstances, it's still a long process to bring a mine into production. So this graphic was created a couple of years ago, and in a perfect world, the feasibility and the permitting periods are accurate, but lately they've been taking even longer. But miners are tenacious, and with the growing demand and with our great potential, commodity prices are robust. We really want to see projects moving forward. We think that we're on the cusp of a real change for mining in Alaska. And of course, we've got our existing mines who continue to do exploration and further development to extend the life of their operations. So normally at this point, we're often asked, well, where are the mines and what they produce? And I know this crowd is pretty familiar, particularly with the mines in the interior, Fort Knox, Northern Star Pogo, and Usabelli, as well as the projects. So I'm going to just skip through it really fast because we've got a number of other areas, and I know that we're already halfway through our time. So this is really just to help people understand, what's being produced where in Alaska. And you can see that there's a real regional impact for mining in Alaska. We're not all in one place. We're in the Northwest, in the interior and Southeast. And then the projects as well, which are the green spots, are also all over the state. And then you've got the yellow circles, which is something we think is really important, which shows over 90 communities in Alaska where people who work in the mining industry live. And again, you can see, well, there's quite a few in the rail belt. They're also spread all over the state. So mining really has a regional impact. These are good jobs. They are family supporting wages, and they're in many, many different parts of rural Alaska as well as the rail belt. Deantha's going to talk about placer mining now.
Thanks. So you all know a lot about placer mining. Fairbanks is arguably the most concentrated area of placer miners. When we last did an economic report, the interior was home to the most placer miners of anywhere in the state, both residentially and the location of the mines. But I do want to share with you what we shared with the legislature, and that is the collective impact of the 170 active placer mines across the state. We don't say it because it's cute. It really is our seventh large mine in terms of employment, in terms of economic impact to the state, in terms of really the contributions that our placer miners do regionally that really benefits the entire state of Alaska. What I shared with the legislature was, placer mining is a small scale method where gold is recovered from dirt using water and gravity. And if I were to take you to one of these mines, and we use the example that if Senator Bishop gave you a tour to his mine, you'd get the impression that you're looking at a neighborhood construction project. So if you look at the far right top, just yellow iron equipment moving earth around. That would generally be the impression you'd be left with. The operations are small in footprint. The average workforce for them is 4 employees. There are a few that are much larger. There are many, many that are only one person, one man band that does it all. And a lot of them are family owned and all operate seasonally when the ground isn't frozen. So you all know, this is an economic engine. It's a big pillar of our industry. And in many of these cases have started with a placer mine and eventually led to a discovery of a lode, meaning a larger mine in the area as a result of the placer mining that took place there. So next slide.
I tell you, I've been surprised over the years to find out just how many people are active in placer mining.
Yep.
Yeah, it was surprising. Quite a few.
It is. And I think in Fairbanks, it's such a special thing that you can be sitting next to someone at Fairbanks Chamber and you go, what do you do? And I think you have all probably been in a situation where you've looked at the person and been like, I would have never guessed you were a placer miner. You weren't the picture I had in my head of a placer miner. These are, first of all, these are wonderful people that I really enjoy working with, but they are, even though they love playing in the dirt all summer long and they love being involved in their community when they come back into town. They really are very important people in our community. And they, I think it's just, I get a little gushy about it because I think it's unique to Alaska and it's a really wonderful part of our industry. So I'm going to transition to the environmental safeguards. We have hammered home why we need mining, but we have also hammered home, and I won't give you more specific technical details about why we think Alaska is the right place to meet our mineral demand. We maintain that our mining operations and the agencies that regulate them account for what is a world-class regulatory system here in Alaska. Our mines are permitted for the protection of all aspects of the environment, whether it's air, land, water, fish and wildlife, and human health. We're constantly striving to reduce our emissions. We look at our energy and our water consumption, and we continuously look at finding efficiencies in every aspect of our operation. We're underneath strict regulatory oversight throughout the mine life. So from the first foot on the ground doing exploration, all the way to when the mine closes. And after closure, there's extensive planning beforehand for closure. And after closure, there is a plan to do reclamation and there's tailored financial assurance. So if for some reason the state has to step in and do the reclamation, the money is there to cover the cost. So this is an overview of what it takes to permit a large mine. This is supplied by the Department of Natural Resources. And it's a wordy slide, but what is here is important. It shows truly what it takes to permit, to plan and do the environmental study, to do the review, to do the testing, and the ultimate approval process to permit a large mine in Alaska. It takes many years from start to finish, and it has dozens of local and state and federal government agencies involved in the process. The permits that are listed here are what's typical for a mine that is on state or privately held land. So there's still a large amount of those federal authorizations that you see in the right column required for a mine on state or private land. If you were looking at permitting a mine on federal lands, you would have a number of additional permits under BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, or the U.S. Forest Service's mining regulations. Permits for mines, they contain multiple stipulations that are in addition to compliance with laws and regulations. And so what I mean when I say this is agencies often do, and they certainly can, prescribe additional practices for the mine to perform outside of the statutes and regulations. So the main point of this slide is just to show that there's no one yes decision to a mine. There is no rubber stamp to say, yes, this mine can move forward. And none of these permits and none of these steps have a guaranteed approval. Every mine is different. Every mine has a tailor-made plan. And that plan is really discussed back and forth between the project proponent, the developer, and the agency. It's very common for a lot of these permits to be submitted to the agency, and the agency goes back to the project developer and says, we think you can do sections C and F better, and we want to see you do this here. And it goes back and forth before the permit application actually comes out to the public for review and input. So it's a really lengthy process, and it is something that is very stringent and something that we are very proud of. And I've got an editorial comment kind of regarding this process. This is information supplied by DNR, but I want to highlight in particular as it relates to the recent policy discussions and decisions at Ambler, that our industry believes in engaging with the public early and often. Karen and I are often approached by companies that are brand new to Alaska and they're looking at investing in a project, and they come to us and say, can you give us some advice on how we can be successful here? And we always encourage them to go talk to the community and to the residents very early on, first thing. It is imperative to us to work with the local residents and the general public and to hear their priorities and concerns. And we don't just talk to them, we listen to them. And ultimately, I think we often see a better project proposal because of that early on engagement and that input we get from the local community residents. This is not just a thing that I can say, oh, remember this happened that one time. This is a very common process and a very common practice in our industry that we believe very highly in. And it probably goes against some of the things you've read in the newspaper. So next slide. Again, this is a PowerPoint slide from DNR. I know it's got a lot going on, but it drills down into the state of Alaska's specific environmental management, and it provides an overview of how many agencies are involved and how many departments are involved in evaluating mining proposals, and what their monitoring rules are throughout. So in addition to the no automatic approval I discussed a moment ago, this slide really does a great job highlighting that continuously throughout the process, there are multiple opportunities for public participation. So here you can see 13 permits within the state where a public notice is required. So the agencies are required to put out a notice to the public, and there's an additional 4 where public notice is done by the state of Alaska as a courtesy. So the process is transparent, and it's really designed to make sure that the public has a voice in the mining activity in our state. So Jomo, here we have another handover if you'd like me to take any questions.
Certainly. Yes, I would open it up. Do we have any questions? I do see there is one in the chat box.
Oh, yes, Brenda. Brenda's question is the administration still having coordinated permitting where they ask the various departments to work together to help the mine smooth the permitting process? Fantastic question. So the middle of this slide is the large mine permit team, and the very middle is the Office of Project Management and Permitting. We call that OPUMP for short because we love our acronyms in the mining industry. And OPUMP is in charge of coordinating large scale permits for industries like mine. They certainly do it in the oil and gas industry and other types of industrial development as well. OPUMP is a model in which a company will actually engage with them early and often. And OPUMP is generally functioning on reimbursable service agreements, meaning that they will do this permit coordination. They will work with local governments, they will work with the federal government and do the coordination under the large mine permit team for our proposals, and have all of those agencies talk to each other and do that coordinating process. And they turn around and invoice the mines for that work. So, and Karen a little bit later will talk about revenues to the state of Alaska and where they come from. But the very special thing is that here is an opportunity for coordinated permitting, which is a benefit and an advantage to us, certainly when we have the collaboration amongst the different types of agencies and the different branches of government. But it's also a benefit to Alaska in that they turn around and invoice the mines for the personnel time at these agencies. So it doesn't cost the Alaskan taxpayer, if you will, to be able to, that doesn't go out of the general fund dollars to do this permit coordination. It is something that the mines pay for by getting invoiced afterwards from the agencies. And Brenda, to answer your question, what is the cutoff for large versus smaller mines? Can a smaller, medium-sized mine get the same assistance? Yes, absolutely. I would say it's not common for a placer mine. Placer mining has a process called the APMA, where DNR does a sort of smaller scale of their permitting coordination. Placer mines don't have dams, for instance. You have the dam safety certification here, things like that. But there is a smaller coordinated process for placer mining. But for exploration projects, for medium size, yes, there is no cutoff, and really anyone can use it. But there are but this model is available to any company that would like to use it.
Permitting and sorry, did you have more?
There is a question about Alaska Native entities involved formally or informally, but I think, Karen, we have a slide coming up that would be better fit in there. So Marianne, if you don't mind, I'll make a note that we will answer that when we get to the point in the presentation.
So I'm going to cover the operational oversight once the mine actually goes into production. And Alaska has one of the best water quality monitoring systems in the world with respect to mines. It has three distinct parts. First of all, we do water quality monitoring, which is pretty standard globally, although our system could be considered to be more comprehensive than many. But in Alaska, we take a further second step, which is less common in other jurisdictions, and we do biomonitoring. So our Department of Fish and Game oversees monitoring of the algae, the benthic environment, just the sedimentary or bottom layer, and also the fish, looking at metals uptake, habitat, and population. The third part is Alaska is one of the few, perhaps possibly one of the only jurisdictions that also requires periodic third-party monitoring of not only the company's compliance, but also monitoring of the state agency that oversees the company's reports and results. And we haven't found anywhere else that does all three of these steps in this depth, and it's something we think we can be very proud of in Alaska. So that strict regulatory oversight during the operations continues all the way through reclamation and closure. And there's requirements for reclamation and closure that are not well known. We spent a lot of time on this with the legislature this month. And I'll go fairly quickly, but this is something that we find the general public is not aware of. And so we really want to emphasize these points. The first is that a mine has to put forward a plan for reclamation and closure before it ever starts to operate. And that plan has to be approved by the Commissioner of Natural Resources. This is mandated by law. Second is that they have to put up the financial assurance that Deantha mentioned earlier on. This is not a fund for the company to use to do their reclamation. This is funds that are guaranteed to the state. So if for some reason the company is unable to do that reclamation work, the state is able to step in and take it over without having to use any state money to do so. Third, it doesn't matter where the company is, it's headquartered or who owns the land. Every single operation in Alaska is required to meet, a large operation in Alaska is required to meet these financial assurance requirements. I just want to draw your attention to these photos that were provided by Usabelli. There's only a 6-month difference in those two photographs. And you can see with the recontouring and the vegetation how much can be achieved in just 6 months. But reclamation is actually a long process. So that's just the beginning. And then we'll look at, this area is probably very familiar to you. I'm sure many of you that have been to Usabelli. This very lush spruce forest is an area that used to be mined. And there's 3 phases to reclamation of coal mining in Alaska. The first is usually done fairly quickly, which is the recontouring and excuse me, and backfilling. But the second can take several years because it's the revegetation. And then the third is really the highest level, which requires both phase 1 and phase 2 to have been completed, as well as 2 years of vegetation studies. And then And then there has to be at least 10 years since the completion of phase 1 and 2 before phase 3 can be recognized. So it's a very, very high standard. And you can see here that Poker Flats, which was fully recognized to have reached phase 3 in 2021. And it's important to remember, that Usability was doing reclamation before it was required by law. They did it because it was the right thing to do. Here you have a coal mine that is, right next to Denali National Park. And the mine committed to that they would restore the land, and they posted a bond backing that promise. So really, really proud of the commitment that they have made. I see something in chat, so I'm going to check that real quick.
Oh no, that was just me. I found a copy of the presentation that
just in case there was a question about this particular slide, I wanted to make sure, in case Lisa wanted to correct me on anything. So here's another example, also from the interior, which is True North, which is operated by Kinross. And frankly, the quote from Commissioner Feige, says it best. You've got the developers that lease the land. They provided a valuable commodity to markets. They employed Alaskans that paid taxes and royalties. And when they were finished, they returned the land to a condition that could be used and enjoyed with the level of return to the flora and fauna that is expected. So Commissioner Feige talked about some of those economic benefits. Deantha is going to talk bigger picture about other benefits.
Yes. So, Commissioner Feige in that previous slide, I agree with Karen, her quote, the system works and the system is awesome. Her quote mentions some of the benefits that a mining operation can provide: the creation of jobs, the paying of state and local taxes, the ultimate funding of public services. But there's really so much more that a mine can do to make a difference in a community. And I know in Fairbanks, you guys see this every single day. The mines that are funding and creating the vocational training, the scholarships, the support of Alaska businesses by those businesses providing goods and services to our mines, support of Alaska nonprofits, and promoting a safety culture or teaching skills that really get passed on at home or in the communities and as people go through life. So next slide, please. That's okay. I shouldn't say next slide to you. I know you're working on it. So let's talk jobs. And I want to start by saying, I think it's understated and less known than we like to think about how many types of people and how many types of skill sets can be a miner. Miners aren't just geologists and engineers, although they are very important. Miners are truck drivers and environmental scientists. They're in camp services, they're accountants, they're medics, they're in HR. We need pretty much every type of occupation to be within the mining industry, even more so in some of our remote locations, but really everywhere. We join the gamut of Alaskan employers that are currently looking for Alaskan employees to work in our industry. And to do so, we invest heavily in education and training opportunities really across the state, from the technical vocational training entities to the University of Alaska's programs. It's a big area of priority for us to start engaging with students at the high school age, to educate about what the opportunities are out there, to get trained up, to educate about what the job opportunities are in our industry, so that students know what their options are as they begin to debate their career path. I know when I was a senior in high school, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. I think that's pretty common, and it is our priority to say that, working in our industry doesn't just mean that you have a pickaxe underground. There are a lot of different types of occupations that we are looking to fill all of the time, and even more so these days. And I think that's a whole nother topic that we could talk about for a long time. These are great jobs. So we employ directly about 4,700 people, just those are people that are working at a mine, and thousands more good jobs for people that are working for those contracting companies that support our industry and provide us those goods and services. So just under 10,000 total direct and indirect jobs in our industry. And they're very good jobs. They are mostly year round. They have an average of about $115,000 a year salary. That's twice the state's average salary, average annual salary for all sectors of the economy. And I think in Fairbanks, your community is a good testament to everybody there knows a miner. It might be your daughter's kindergarten teacher's husband, or it might be your kid's ski coach. Miners are sprinkled throughout your community, and I think you can see the impact of jobs and what those employed miners that live in interior Alaska are able to do within your community.
I don't want to arrest the presentation. I know we're getting near the top of the hour, but if I may, 2 questions on this slide.
Sure.
Okay, so first, regarding that 9,600 jobs, would that capture, say, Mr. Burgraff or Click Bishop, or is this those working at the large-scale year-round mines?
It would capture the placer mines. So this number is taken from a study that we do annually, where we go out to the agencies and to the private sector industry companies themselves and get that number. So we do survey all of the placer mining permit holders and get the information from them as to how many employees they have as well.
Okay, thank you. And of course, I believe that report is on your website.
It is.
Awesome. And then as far as AvTech, I see AvTech, MAPTS. Here we have the Pipeline Training Center, there in Southside. Are either one of these training centers here, or is there a mining training center here in town?
So the MAPS Underground Mine Training Center is in Delta Junction. I know that's not in town, but I do consider it in interior Alaska, and it is something that underground mine training center is really a statewide training center. MAPS is actually headquartered in Soldotna, but they do the majority of their training in Delta Junction to get people underground and get them certified in the way that they need to be able to work at a mine. So Pogo, Kensington, and Greens Creek and Southeast all put a lot of miners. They also do the foundational safety training that is required to work at any mine in Alaska there. So headquartered in Delta Junction, but it services the whole state. We also, I would say, since you brought up Pipeline Training Center, we have a lot of commonality with the training entities that service the oil and gas industry as well. We have a lot of cross-industry occupations that we both employ. So I think it's fairly common to see people come out of the Pipeline Training Center, but end up working at a mine and vice versa.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll be quick. I mentioned the survey. We are in the process of updating it for the end of 2021. We should have this in the next 3 weeks to a month. But the most recent number we have shows $800 million annually spent on goods and services with about 600 businesses in Alaska. A lot of those are headquartered and brought out of interior. So from heavy equipment to pumps and parts, to things like on the right here, this is a powerhouse module for Red Dog Mine that was assembled in Anchorage, and their man camp was assembled in the Mat-Su Valley. So we're always happy to see stories like that, and we really value our partnerships with these Alaska businesses to keep us going.
So the amount of time that we have left does not do justice to the last couple of slides. So forgive me that we don't have a little more time. But
we can run long. Again, don't feel like you have to cut us loose.
Okay. Well, and if people have something that they need to get to, feel free, obviously. So you're all familiar with ANCSA, and especially given that this is the 50th anniversary year. But ANCSA really is got an amazing, what I think was probably precedent setting for land claims agreements in any other place, is the royalty sharing provision 7I and 7J. So 70% of the net income from royalties for subsurface mineral development or timber has to be shared out amongst all 12 of the regional associations. And then 7J requires that 50% of what each regional corporation receives is then shared amongst the villages. So Red Dog on Nana land has been one of the biggest contributors to 7I royalty sharing in the state. The mine didn't start operation until 1989, but the royalties started in 1982. And over that period through 2021, NANA received $2.65 billion. And of that, 1.6 billion was shared then to the regional corporations and then from them to the village corporations. So it's fair to say that Red Dog has touched every Native corporation in Alaska, or has benefited every Native corporation in Alaska, and then from them, the individual shareholders. So obviously, jobs for shareholders is very important for corporations that are looking for development on their land. And Red Dog has an ultimate goal of 100% shareholder hire. They're with their regular employees, they're at 56%. And then with seasonal and temp workers, almost 100%. And always striving through scholarships and on-the-job training and other development programs to increase that number. But NANA was also, I think, really forward-thinking back in the 80s to say, we don't just want royalties. We want jobs for our shareholders, but we also want business opportunities so we can develop and grow companies that can work at Red Dog and then work anywhere else in the state or the country or globally. And that's exactly what happened. Red Dog was kind of an incubator, and NANA now has thousands of employees all over the world. So real example of successful growth through incubation. Somebody asked about engagement with Native groups for mining projects. And obviously, if the interest is on Native corporation land, it goes without saying, I mean, nothing can be done without the agreement and partnership of the landowner. But then, of course, in any project that's looking at state or federal land, working with all local stakeholders, especially including tribal organizations and tribal governments, is incredibly important. And as Deantha mentioned, our recommendation to any company that's looking at exploration in Alaska is start with the local community and stakeholders. Then when it comes to what mining in Alaska actually does for the state, this is a study that's just come out. It's an update of a previous study where they looked at a four-year average of revenues to the state. So they didn't just look at a particularly good year or a particularly poor year, but averaged it out over 2016 to 2019, and determined that 2/3 this far is revenue to the state, to the general fund. This is revenue to municipalities. And then this is what the state actually spent managing the industry. And as you can see, the difference is the net benefit to the state, because the difference is dollars that are available for other things the state does in terms of public safety, health, education, etc. Deantha talked about reimbursable service agreements and the large mine permitting team. And so that's one of the reasons why the state expenses is so low, because the state is able to actually bill the cost of their permitting, of their oversight and monitoring and enforcement to the companies themselves. In 2020, more than $100 million to state government, ADA and Alaska Mental Health Trust, and nearly $50 million to local governments. You well know that Fort Knox is the largest single property taxpayer in Fairbanks North Star Borough. Mines are also the largest property taxpayers and the largest private sector employers in Juneau, and then in Northwest Arctic Borough as well.
That is quite the ROI.
Yes.
Indeed. And so to end, we just want to talk about community partnerships, because we are Alaskans. When there's a need, we roll up our sleeves, we help out. So that could be long-term partnerships, like the work that's been done between the mining industry and the American Heart Association over many, many years, our connections with the Tanana Valley State Fair, UCBelly, obviously tons of long-term partnerships, particularly with the university. but it's also turning around when there's an emergency. And we often see that in our rural operations. Tech has helped out when there was a fire at the general store in one of the nearby villages. Donlin provided water and wipes and all kinds of sanitary supplies when there was a water plant, breakdown. It's what they do. They are often the closest operation in a neighborhood that has the capacity to help, and they stand up and do it. At the beginning of the pandemic, both Pogo and Kinross went through their warehouses to determine if they had any N95 masks that they could provide to the local hospitals back at the very beginning, when we felt like we didn't, had a serious shortage of PPE. I mean, people did what they could to help in the community, and we're really proud of that. I see there's a few items in the chat. So is there anything?
Hey, Karen, it was just me thanking people for tuning in. So.
Okay. So does any further questions? Oops, I forgot. We have a last slide with our contact details on it here. If anybody has any follow-up questions, feel free to connect with either of us. We're always happy to hear from people, and we look forward to seeing you in person as well the next time we're up in Fairbanks.
All right, well, thank you so much. We do have a question here for Mr. Burgraff, and I would open it up to the remainder of the group.
Well, I'd just like to make one comment. You've prepared a very good presentation. Mining has been a very integral part of the state of Alaska. Fairbanks wouldn't be here, Juneau wouldn't be here today, and many other small communities if it wasn't for mining. And it's very important that we continue to fight the battle and try to be able to develop our mines and provide jobs to the economy. And I want to commend you for the work you do and the necessity that we all work together to try to help develop Alaska. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Roger. A big part of what we do is because of people like Roger being involved in providing us information every day. So.
All right, I will say, referring back to the slide on NANA, the distributions, the jobs, that's quite a model. In fact, I wonder how the world might be different if this kind of model had been applied globally to development. Again, where the local people progressively, again, we're in a greater and greater position to not only just have jobs, but learn management skills for their own development. It is quite the model.
Many of you know I'm originally from Canada, and Canada did not have a comprehensive land claim settlement like Alaska did. So it's been going on for decades, and there has been a lot of interest in learning about ANCSA and also learning about agreements like NANA's in order to find the best ways of moving forward in other parts of the world as well.
I completely agree, and I will echo Karen's comments that we are consistently questioned about our ANCSA model and complimented, and people that are not from Alaska are really mind blown to understand how that works, and really is something that we should be so proud of, whether you've been in Alaska your whole life or you're just getting here. It's a pretty amazing thing that I think the rest of the world kind of envies. You guys have probably already talked about this, but I just dropped a link in the chat. Doyon has been passing around a event invitation to an event that they're putting together with UAF. And you guys probably already know about this, but Doyon and UAF are putting on this event to look at the 50th anniversary of ANCSA, and it looks incredibly like a great event. And if you don't already know about it, I just dropped that link in the chat.
Much appreciated.
I want to thank Marianne for her comment about gold having more uses than just jewelry. That is actually one of our favorite things to talk about. We spent a lot of time on social media on that. We didn't include it in this presentation simply because we wanted to spend more time up front on some of those federal issues. And rest assured, when we speak to the general public, we usually start our presentation talking more about the uses of minerals in everyday life. And it's a big part of our marketing efforts.
It does seem to me that one of the big challenges Alaska faces is people's recollections. Again, so much of it was done wrong. It's hard to believe that it could be done right. And as they look around the world today, again, what they mostly see are examples of it being done wrong. So it's hard to believe that, again, it could be done right here, but we really should. Again, Alaska has just a number of really solid replicable models, and should be allowed to apply them, again, within the boundaries of its own state, for sure. Ms. Nichols, I see you've taken yourself, or you've started your video camera. Do you have a question or a comment?
Oh, I just thought it was about time to show my face.
Okay. Okay. Well, all right, everybody. Again, Ms. Matthias, Ms. Skibinski, thank you so much for the presentation. When I saw you all there at the legislature, I emailed you all immediately. We had to ask if you might do this for our group. Well, all right, everybody. Again, we do have one more second, so I'll give you last call on any questions or comments. All right, well then we'll call that a show. Well, thanks a million, everybody. I'm still working on whatever our presentation might be for next week. So if you have any recommendations or suggestions or requests, just go ahead and give me a call. Otherwise, I'll be seeing what I can pull together. I'm liking having these mining days. I meant to have mining March Madness, but we've slipped into April. So we may have April mining madness. But again, I really appreciate it. So everyone, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week. And we will see you next week.
We appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye.